in February 2015, while political leaders were formalizing the Minsk II Agreement, artillery fire continued its relentless bombardment of Debaltseve. This small city, strategically positioned between Donetsk and Luhansk, became a stark paradox where a ceasefire existed on paper while war raged with unabated ferocity on the ground. The critical question that emerged from this brutal confrontation was why Debaltseve, a location that appeared to be a defensible Ukrainian outpost, ultimately transformed into a deadly strategic trap for the forces holding it. The battle for this city became a defining moment in the conflict. A costly lesson in the harsh realities of modern warfare where military positions and political pronouncements collide. Following the significant losses at Ilovaiski in late 2014, the Ukrainian military adopted a strategic defensive posture across the front. Within this new defensive line, however, they retained control of Debaltseve, a salient that pushed deep into territory held by separatist forces. On a map, the Debaltseve pocket resembled a knife thrust between the two separatist-controlled centers of Donetsk and Luhansk, a position that theoretically served to disrupt the opposing sides' lines of communication and supply. From a purely military standpoint, however, such a salient is an inherently vulnerable position. It extends an army's own supply lines while exposing its flanks, making it extremely difficult to hold if subjected to a concerted multi-directional assault aimed at encirclement. The strategic importance of Debaltseve far outweighed its size or public recognition. It stood as the most critical rail and road hub in eastern Ukraine, a logistical nexus that dictated the flow of men and material across the region. Control over Debaltseve meant control over the primary supply route connecting Donetsk and Luhansk. It was the key to coordinating the movement of logistics, fuel, and ammunition. And it enabled the rapid deployment of mechanized forces across the theater of operations. For the Ukrainian side, holding this city was essential for preventing the two self-proclaimed republics from consolidating their territory and creating a unified front. It also allowed them to maintain constant strategic pressure on their adversaries. Conversely, for the separatist forces and their backers, Debaltseve was a persistent thorn in their side, an obstacle that had to be removed at all costs to secure their operational depth and consolidate their gains. Inside the Debaltseve salient, the Ukrainian military had deployed a considerable force. The core of the defense was formed by the 128th Mechanized Brigade, supported by elements from the 25th, 30th, and 40th Brigades. These units were further reinforced by artillery detachments and National Guard formations, bringing the total estimated troop strength within the pocket to between 5,000 and 8,000 soldiers. Facing them were the combined forces of the Donetsk and Luhansk separatists, heavily augmented by tank battalions, powerful artillery units, and the direct participation of Russian regular army formations. The attacking side held a clear advantage in several key areas. They possessed superior numbers, overwhelming firepower from massed artillery, and greater mobility to execute large-scale envelopment maneuvers. The balance of forces was decisively tilted in favor of the side seeking to eliminate the salient. The assault to close the Debaltseve pocket began in mid-January 2015. The attacking forces chose not to launch a direct frontal assault on the city itself. Instead, they employed classic encirclement tactics, methodically capturing the outlying villages and defensive positions that guarded the flanks of the salient. Their primary objective was to cut off all supply routes into Debaltseve, gradually tightening the ring from both the north and the south. The MO3 highway, the main artery that served as the lifeline for the Ukrainian defenders, came under constant and intense shelling. Supply convoys attempting to reach the besieged city were systematically tracked by unmanned aerial vehicles, intercepted by pre-sighted artillery, and subjected to ambushes along the perilous route. Day by day, the Debaltseve salient was transformed from a strategic outpost into an inescapable fire pocket. With Ukrainian forces increasingly isolated from reinforcement and resupply, on February 12, 2015, the Minsk II Agreement was signed, a diplomatic effort intended to halt the bloodshed. On paper, the agreement called for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire, to be followed by the withdrawal of all heavy weaponry from the line of contact. At Debaltseve, however, the reality was the exact opposite. In the hours and days following the signing, the shelling intensified, and the fighting grew more ferocious than at any previous point in the battle. The attacking side publicly declared that Debaltseve was an unresolved internal affair not covered by the terms of the Minsk Agreement, and they pressed their advantage to secure a military victory. Simultaneously, the Ukrainian government and Kyiv continued to insist that Debaltseve is not under siege. This was a political statement, aimed at maintaining morale and a strong negotiating position. But it stood in stark contradiction to the grim reality unfolding on the battlefield, where the encirclement was nearly complete. By the middle of February, the situation for the Ukrainian defenders inside Debaltseve had become irreversible. Supplies of ammunition were critically low, and the relentless enemy artillery fire overwhelmed their positions. Command and control systems began to break down as communications were disrupted by the constant bombardment. The aftermath of the battle revealed the extent of the losses and the gravity of the consequences. The Ukrainian armed forces suffered hundreds of soldiers killed, wounded, or captured, and lost a substantial amount of heavy equipment, including tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery systems. The defeat dealt a severe blow to military morale. For the attacking side, the victory came at the cost of heavy losses, but their primary strategic objective was achieved. The capture of Debaltseve reconnected the territories of Donetsk and Luhansk, allowing for secure logistical and military coordination between the two separatist entities. Ukraine had lost control of a key strategic junction, and the balance of power on the battlefield had shifted decisively in favor of its opponents. The fall of Debaltseve represented Ukraine's most significant military defeat since the Battle of Ilovaisk. A strategic assessment of the battle raises difficult questions about the decisions made. The fall of Debaltseve was not a result of poor performance by the Ukrainian soldiers on the ground, who fought with tenacity in an increasingly hopeless situation. Rather, the defeat can be attributed to a series of strategic miscalculations. There was a critical underestimation of the risk of encirclement and the enemy's capability to achieve it. The decision to withdraw was delayed, influenced by a desire to prioritize political messaging over the harsh military reality on the ground. In contrast, the attacking side demonstrated patience, a willingness to concentrate overwhelming firepower, and a precise sense of timing, launching their final push only when the defenders were fully isolated and their position had become untenable. This leads to the final lingering question of the battle. If the Ukrainian command had ordered a withdrawal from the salient earlier, could the catastrophic losses have been avoided? Or was Debaltseve, by its very geographical and strategic nature, an untenable position from the outset, a bulge on the map that was destined to be cut off and destroyed? The Battle of Debaltseve is more than just a historical account of a military engagement. It stands as a costly and enduring lesson on the perilous price of holding vulnerable salients in the unforgiving calculus of war.